In the waning years of the 19th century, as European empires drew lines across maps of a continent they barely understood, a quiet but fierce determination began to ripple through the kingdoms, villages, and grasslands of Africa. From the forests of West Africa to the highlands of Ethiopia, a chorus of voices rose in defiance. This is the story of that resistance, not of a single, unified war, but of 1,000 different battles, each a desperate and ingenious attempt to hold back a rising tide. The first and most obvious form of opposition came from the barrels of guns. In southern Africa, the Zulu kingdom, under the leadership of King Cetshwayo, delivered one of the most stunning blows to British imperial arrogance. On a scorching January day in 1879, beneath the shadow of a mountain called Isandlwana, a Zulu army of some 20,000 warriors, armed primarily with short stabbing spears and cowhide shields, annihilated a British column of over 1,300 men. It was the British Empire's worst defeat in its history on the continent. For a brief, electrifying moment, it seemed as though the spears of Africa could indeed repel the rifles of Europe. To the east, the modest war in Sudan, 1881 to 1899, presented another formidable military challenge. Here, resistance was fueled by religious fervor. A Sudanese religious leader, Muhammad Ahmad, proclaimed himself the Mahdi, the guided one, and united a vast army of followers to overthrow the Turco-Egyptian regime, a proxy for British interests. His forces captured Khartoum and held the territory for nearly 2 decades. Meanwhile, in West Africa, the brilliant military strategist Samori Touré, founder of the Wasulu Empire, waged a 16-year war against the expanding French colonial army, 1882 to 1898. He was a master of tactics, building a disciplined army armed with modern firearms, using scorched earth policies, and even attempting to manufacture his own weapons. When the French pushed him from his original territories, he did not surrender. He simply packed up his entire empire and moved it eastward, re-establishing his capital and continuing the fight. Touré's long struggle was a testament to a leader who refused to concede defeat, even as the odds mounted against him. But African resistance was not solely a story of pitched battles. Often, it was more subtle, more spiritual, and in many ways, more revolutionary. Across the continent, prophets and religious leaders emerged as the most potent symbols of defiance. In German East Africa, modern-day Tanzania, the harsh colonial policies forcing villagers to grow cotton for export sparked the Maji Maji Rebellion in 1905. The uprising was orchestrated by a spirit medium named Kinjekitile, who provided his followers with a magic water Maji in Swahili that he promised would turn German bullets into water. While the water failed to stop the Germans, the rebellion was remarkable for uniting over 20 different ethnic groups in a common cause, a powerful expression of Pan-African solidarity long before the term existed. The German response was genocidal, leading to the deaths of an estimated 75,000 to 300,000 people, mostly from a deliberately induced famine. Yet, even in horrific defeat, the rebellion became a foundational myth of Tanzanian nationalism. Similar religious military uprisings erupted elsewhere. The Ndebele and Shona people of Zimbabwe fought the First Chimurenga in 1896-97, a coordinated uprising against the British South Africa Company that was heavily inspired by spiritual leaders. In the Kingdom of Congo, a century and a half earlier, a young woman named Kimpavita, also known as Doña Beatrice, led a spiritual movement called Antonianism, 1704 to 1706. She was not leading armies, but a revolution of the mind. Claiming to be possessed by Saint Anthony, she preached a syncretic Christianity that declared Jesus Christ to be a Congolese man and argued that the Bible was a history of Africa. Her movement, which attracted tens of thousands of followers, was a direct challenge to the authority of both the Catholic Church and the Portuguese colonial presence, and for this, she was burned at the stake in 1706 as a heretic. Resistance could also be found in a simple refusal to comply. For the Igbo people of southeastern Nigeria, The arrival of the Royal Niger Company was met not with a single war, but with a prolonged, low-intensity guerrilla campaign known as the Ikunku Movement, 1898 to 1911. The Ikunku were a secret society whose members, bound by oath, used hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and poison arrows to harass the British for over a decade. This was not a conventional state defending its borders, but a decentralized society using every tool at its disposal to make colonial rule as costly and chaotic as possible. Similarly, in Southwest Africa, modern-day Namibia, the Herero and Nama people rose up in 1904 against German settlers, who had seized their land and cattle. The Herero, under their leader Samuel Maharero, and the Nama, led by Captain Hendrik Witbooi, fought a desperate war that was, in many ways, a last stand to preserve their way of life. The Germans, in turn, responded with a campaign of annihilation that is now widely recognized as the first genocide of the 20th century, ordering the Herero to be driven into the Omaheke Desert, where thousands died of thirst. Yet, perhaps the most compelling narrative of African resistance is not one of defeat, but of unprecedented, miraculous victory. As European powers scrambled for territory, Ethiopia stood alone as an ancient Christian empire, a double-edged sword in the heart of Africa, as one observer put it. When Italy, humiliated by its earlier failures, invaded in 1895, Emperor Menelik II and his formidable wife, Empress Tetu Batul, did something extraordinary. They set aside internal rivalries and mobilized a massive, well-armed army. On March 1, 1896, at the Battle of Adwa, the Ethiopian forces delivered a crushing defeat to the Italian army, securing their nation's sovereignty and becoming the only African country, aside from Liberia, to successfully resist European colonization during the scramble for Africa. Adwa was a beacon of hope, sending a powerful message across the colonized world that European might was not invincible. Finally, resistance was not solely the domain of kings and generals. In 1900, in the Ashanti Empire, modern-day Ghana, the British governor made an enormous miscalculation. He demanded that the Ashanti people surrender their most sacred object, the golden stool, which was believed to contain the soul of the nation. The Ashanti leadership was in disarray, but one voice refused to back down. Queen Mother Nyasasantawa, a woman in her 60s, stepped before the Council of Chiefs and delivered a speech that has echoed through the ages. She shamed the men for their indecision and declared, "If you men will not go forward, then we the women will. I shall call upon my fellow women. We will fight the white men. We will fight until the last of us falls on the battlefield." She then led an army of thousands in the War of the Golden Stool, a fierce rebellion that, while ultimately crushed, stands as a legendary example of female leadership in the fight for African dignity. The early resistance to colonial rule was as diverse as Africa itself. It was the disciplined army of Samari Toure, the holy water of Kinjikitauno, the guerrilla tactics of the Ikunku, the secret oaths of the Nama, the miraculous victory at Adwa, and the fiery resolve of Nyasasantawa. Though nearly all these efforts ultimately failed to prevent colonization, they forged new identities, created enduring national myths, and revealed a fundamental truth: the people of Africa were never passive recipients of their fate. From the very first moment, they fought back.